and many others throughout the European theater. But as I reflected last week, we don't need to be in Normandy to defend our democracy in June of 2025. We need to be here in these halls doing the work in courts across the country and in our communities. And we do need to remember the essential and historical commitment that our nation made at the end of that war to advance democracy and to ensure that we never turn our backs on people who are fleeing persecution. I so appreciate you inviting me here today to participate in this hearing, and it is with a sincere hope that we can come together that I offer my testimony and comments.
All right, opening statements have concluded. We're now going to begin the questioning portion of today's testimony. And I'm going to begin with Governor Walz. Governor Walz, I thought that maybe your statement referencing ICE as Gestapo was an outlier statement, but now that Mr. Lynch has endorsed it, it appears that it could be some type of Democrat talking point. Governor, do you and other Democrat politicians understand why referencing ICE as Gestapo is offensive? I'm going to explain. The Department of Homeland Security is reporting that ICE agents are now experiencing a 413% rise in assaults. We've seen numerous videos of rioters obstructing and assaulting federal law enforcement after your remarks, including in Los Angeles. So, Governor, do you think that comments like that and rhetoric like that put ICE officers and other law enforcement in greater danger?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, any attack on law enforcement is unacceptable, wherever it's at, whether it's state, local.
So you understand, and I've got limited time here. I want to highlight for the governors that real-world impact of the policies that you all continue to defend, even in your opening statements, have on American families. Earlier this year in Governor Pritzker's Illinois, a previously deported illegal alien who had re-entered the country was allegedly drunk driving near the University of Illinois when he struck a car sitting at a red light and then fled the scene. The crash killed 2 young women, including Katie Abraham, whose father and stepmother are here today. This is her poster. Katie had her whole life ahead of her, cut off in an instant. Governor Pritzker, this illegal alien should never have been here. He didn't just flee the scene. He fled the state and was apprehended by federal marshals in Texas using a false name. He now faces criminal charges for reckless homicide, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, and driving under the influence resulting in death. And he faces a federal indictment for having a fraudulent permanent resident card, a fraudulent Social Security card, and a fraudulent use of passport. Governor Pritzker, do you agree that this illegal alien who killed Katie should never have been in the United States in the first place?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me express my condolences to the family, and those are terrible circumstances. Let me also say that anyone who commits a crime in the state of Illinois...
I understand, Governor. Should that criminal have been here in the first place? Did he have a right to be in this country illegally?
If the person is a criminal of any sort, then they ought to be...
So that person had a right to be in the United States.
They ought to be given their due process rights, and they ought to be convicted. And
the criminal who entered this country illegally, in your testimony, had a right to be in this country.
No, I'm suggesting to you that when and I have responsibility for the state of Illinois, I can tell you that it's the responsibility of the federal government to manage immigration in this country. And if you're suggesting that the federal government didn't do its job, that is up to you.
Let me ask you this, Governor.
I can tell you that in the state of Illinois,
do you believe that President Biden did his job in securing the border?
I was critical of things that President Biden did. I think I've been very public about that. I wrote a letter to the president telling him that.
Okay. Thank you. Now back to Governor Walz. You were obviously selected by Vice President Harris to be a running mate in 2024. I'm curious, did you ever ask Vice President Harris about former President Biden's and then President Biden's cognitive decline?
No, not that I can recall, Mr. Chairman.
You saw President Biden's disastrous debate performance. I'm just curious, you never did comment to Vice President Harris, like, Wow. You know, he may not be on the top of his game. Nothing was ever mentioned to Vice President Harris. And the reason I ask, obviously, is because I know you watch CNN, and other networks have interviewed a lot of people, including Jean-Pierre and Buttigieg and others that have suggested that they were shielded from President Biden and weren't allowed to speak to him, and that you know, his mental decline was obvious. You never discussed that with Vice President Harris?
No, not that I can recall, Chairman. And I, as governor and then being on the ticket, I was probably more concerned with my own debate performance than President Biden's. So no.
Let me ask you this, Governor. Do you believe that the Biden-Harris administration secured the border? You mentioned it's the federal government's role to secure the border to protect Americans from illegals entering the country, I guess. Do you think they did a good job of that?
I think the border has been broken for a very long time through many administrations. It's one of the reasons why Vice President Harris was advocating so strongly for the bipartisan bill.
Did she mention her role as the border czar when you all were out campaigning? Or?
Not that I can recall, other than that we talked about the need to pass the bipartisan border legislation that would have done many of the things that, as a governor, I know would have made our jobs easier.
But President Trump secured the border without any legislation. I mean, that was kind of a myth that was in the media and a Democrat talking point that we needed legislation to secure the border. The border's secure.
Everything's fixed.
That's step one. Step two is to deport the criminal illegals, and that's where we're facing obstruction in your all state. So I'm sure there are a lot more questions that will pertain to that. My time's expired. I now recognize Ranking Member Lynch for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's worth saying again that Democrats oppose violence and lawlessness in all its forms. I do want to point out that the vast majority of protesters have been peaceful. But the most egregious and sweeping displays of the use of force and lawlessness we see in the United States today, and the gravest threat to the rights and freedoms of those that we hold dear, are the acts of the Trump administration itself. President Trump and his administration have crossed the line over and over again, from January 6th, when this building was attacked at his direction, to invoking the Alien Enemies Act, to dismantling USAID, to ignoring court orders, to the attacks and threats against law firms that were protecting democracy. As in that in the 5 months since Trump took office and put the for sale sign over the White House, he's earned $2.9 billion on his crypto scam. I mean, to call this unprecedented, that word has lost all its meaning. He keeps making history, but the wrong kind. Just the act of sending the National Guard and troops and active duty Marines to L.A. was already an overreach. Supposedly, now we hear reports that those soldiers and Marines were sent to quell protests, but now are detaining civilians and are being trained to perform immigration enforcement functions. Ms. Perryman, what else could go wrong with the National Guard and Marines deployed in L.A.? What are the risks to the Americans who live, work, and exercise their right to freedom and to free speech there?
Well, I would just say that what our Constitution recognizes and how good government functions is really based on trust. And when we look at National Guards, it is the governors that often call the National Guards in. And so, of course, the fact that we are seeing a situation where the president has taken this step without cooperating with the governor and with local communities there is deeply concerning. And of course, we know from history that could lead to escalations and could lead to violence that is really problematic for all of our communities across the country, including in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Ms. Perryman, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has talked about the deployment order, and he testified that this order, and I'm quoting him, This order is getting ahead of a problem so that if in other places, if there are other riots in places where law enforcement officers are threatened, we would have the capability to surge the National Guard there if necessary. Ms. Perryman, how does the president's broad order and the presumption before the fact that military force would be deployed, how does that pose a threat to other cities across the country?
Well, again, it appears to be an escalation, and the main thing that's really important to so many Americans across the country, as well as local law enforcement in so many areas, that local law enforcement is there to help people be able to peacefully protest. And so there are ways that people in this country can express their views. We don't all agree with each other. And right now you really see the White House, for whatever reason, I think escalating, maybe seeking to create some made-for-TV moments. It's not clear. But I do think that there is a lot at stake here, as you've heard this morning.
Thank you. I want to ask each of the governors, this is a general question. How could each of the governors answer briefly how President Trump's policies, his assaults on the rule of law and his interjection of military force into California, how that would threaten your states, especially where Secretary Hastings has said that he would support that expansion? Mr. Walz, Governor?
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Lynch. Well, first of all, it's one of the federalism policy of this, especially when it comes to posse comitatus and the Insurrection Act. Governors are in charge. Our National Guard, as all of you know, serve in either Title 10 or Title 32 status under the role of governor. Right. And on all of these operations, the absolute pinnacle and the most critical piece is the coordination amongst them. And as a governor not being notified as local law enforcement, it creates a chaotic situation that they cannot operate as a joint unit. And governors are always there. We do it for floods. We do it for civil unrest. But doing it without causes immense danger, not citizens to, but to those very law enforcement officers who are then put in that chaotic situation.
Thank you. Governor Pritzker?
Local law enforcement are the ones who indicate to the governor or to their local officials who talk to the governor about their need for National Guard. And indeed, I've had that situation in the state of Illinois and called out the Guard when I needed to. I'm careful about when I do it, but again, when local law enforcement indicate that they want that backup or they need that support, we do it. Now, I have to say, when the President of the United States is calling out your National Guard over the top of local law enforcement saying that they don't need it, that they have things under control, it tends to have an inflaming effect on what's going on the ground, just when local law enforcement and officials are getting things under control. And I think that's what we saw in Los Angeles.
Governor Hochul?
Those actions absolutely undermine the sovereignty of individual states. States' governors are the commanders-in-chief of the National Guard. They know what to do. As you've heard from my colleagues, we have deployed them in a number of occasions. But undermining confidence in local law enforcement, you're basically saying that there's not a belief that the highly trained individuals of our municipal police departments, like Los Angeles and the city of New York, for example, can't handle their jobs. I have more confidence in our law enforcement than perhaps the president does, and we ought to step back and say this is an overreach of epic proportions.
Thank you. Chair recognizes.
Thank you for your courtesy on the time. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Stefanik from New York.
Thank you. Governor Hochul, on your first day in office, you signed Executive Order 1. Is that correct?
I believe it is.
And you extended this executive order not once, not twice, but 3 times, most recently January 16th this year. Is that correct?
If that's what your facts show, I signed countless executive orders.
I would assume you'd know it's
laws.
Executive Order 1, and this is a continuation of your predecessor's sanctuary state policies, correct? Is included in that.
I want to be sure we are defining sanctuary state properly.
I'll define it for you. It is the policy of the state that state officers or employees shall not disclose information to federal immigration authorities for the purpose of federal civil immigration enforcement. It goes on to say, law enforcement officers may not use resources, equipment, or personnel for the purpose of detecting and apprehending any individual suspected or wanted for violating a civil immigration office. Law enforcement officers have no authority in the state of New York to take any policy action solely because the person is an undocumented alien. That's a quote in your executive orders that you extended. Now, do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to get back to the first part.
No, I'm asking
question.
a question. Do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to make sure you understand that this simply says that we will cooperate with ICE.
No, it does not say that. I read what it says, and let me talk to you about the results. Do you know who Sakir Akan is? You should, as the governor of New York State. Do you know?
Refresh my recollection.
He was an illegal migrant in New York. And do you know what crime he committed in addition to being here illegally?
No, I do not.
You do not? This was widely reported. He found a 15-year-old girl, threatened her with a metal pole, told her to get into the back seat of his car. He took her clothes off, and he violently raped her in Albany, New York. Do you know who Sebastian Zapita Khalil is?
I'm sure you'll tell me there's many cases, whether they're
These are high-profile cases.
Yes.
New Yorkers know about them, and you don't. So let's talk about Sebastian Zapita Khalil. Do you know who that is?
I don't have the specific details at my disposal, no.
Well, this is an illegal migrant in New York because of your sanctuary state policies. Do you know what crime he committed?
I'm not familiar at this moment.
I bet you're going to be familiar when I remind you. He found a sleeping woman on the subway, lit her on fire, and burned her alive. This is in Kathy Hochul's New York. And as I'm sure you are aware, and I'll remind you, that ICE issued an order to detain this violent criminal, but that was rejected by New York officials due to sanctuary state laws. Now, do you know who Raymond Rojas Basilio is?
I just want to say this. These crimes are horrific.
Because of your sanctuary state policies.
In all of these cases, we would work with ICE to remove them.
You did not in this case. They are walking on the streets because of your policies and your executive order that you signed 3 times. Now, Raymond Rojas Basilio, do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. I will explain to you the policies of New York. We cooperate with, I know you're just trying to.
You do not. Specifically, ICE was told not to detain this individual, and he burned a woman alive on the New York subways in Kathy Hochul's New York. So I will keep on going. What about Raymond Rojas Basilio? Do you know who that is?
I'm going to tell you our overall policy, which will address all this.
I'll tell you who that is. He is an illegal who molested an 11-year-old in our state because, again, of your sanctuary state policies. This illegal was shielded from federal immigration enforcement and able to commit this heinous crime. And what about Wilson Castillo-Diaz? Do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. We do cooperate fully with ICE in criminal prosecution. Our sanctuary
You're not advocating for these victims.
Only deal
this
with
is a 5-year-old who was raped on Long Island in Nassau County. You are not advocating on behalf of these victims. You are shielding illegals. Even in your opening statement, you prioritize putting illegals first.
That is not
Rapes
true.
of young girls, beatings of NYPD cops by illegals who are here under Kathy Hochul's failed policies, burning New Yorkers alive. This is Kathy Hochul's New York. It's one of the many reasons why you're hemorrhaging support from hardworking New York
These are
families.
horrific crimes, and they're heartbreaking.
They're horrific crimes that are committed on your watch. You signed this executive order on your first day in office. You signed it again and again this January. We deserve a governor who stands up for law-abiding New Yorkers, doesn't put illegals first, but actually puts New Yorkers first. I appreciate
Rather than going after the viral moment, I suggest you look at the facts.
I'm standing up for New Yorkers. No. Rather than addressing the illegals in New York, you are prioritizing your far-left sanctuary state policies, which you put in place with executive orders. Instead of advocating for victims, a 5-year-old who was raped,
with ICE.
You did not. They were released because of sanctuary state policies in New York State. No amount of words is going to clean up your failed record and these horrific crimes committed in sanctuary state that you created. And with that, I yield back.
Your representation, the facts,
Gentlelady
absolutely false.
Yields back.
Absolutely
Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be real. Since the start of the Trump administration, each day has been more nightmarish than the last. But in the past few days and weeks, we have seen a significant escalation of Trump's mass deportation agenda. On May 29th, a 9-year-old child and his father were reportedly detained in Torrance, California, and separated from one another by ICE. A 4th grader ripped from the only community he knows and from the arms of his father. We have kids who are afraid to go to school, afraid that ICE will grab them and their families from school grounds, and afraid their parents will not be there when they get home. Schools are supposed to be safe havens for our children that foster learning and growth. Instead, the Trump administration is deliberately weaponizing them, terrorizing children and families with its immigration policies and threatening more than 600,000 students, kids with detention and removal. President Trump has called for an end to birthright citizenship, a constitutional right recognized since the end of slavery. He has cut federal contracts that give 2-year-olds representation in immigration court. He has ripped the children who are immigrants and United States citizens from schools, their friends, their neighborhoods, and their homes. There is no other way to spin this. President Trump is waging a cruel and deliberate war against children. Ms. Perriman, do all children residing in the United States have a constitutional right to attend public schools regardless of immigration status?
They do.
Ms. Perriman, how is President Trump going further than past presidents in authorizing ICE to carry out enforcement activities in schools, hospitals, and places of worship?
Yes, I mean, this is what brought us to court on behalf of the Baptists and the Quakers and the Sikh communities and other religious communities that are having to challenge this. For more than 30 years, the country had a policy that prevented indiscriminate enforcement activities at what we call sensitive locations. That includes houses of worship, and it includes schools. We saw in the early days of this administration the Department of Homeland Security rescind that policy and endanger people, all people, not just immigrants, but people who are seeking to engage in communal worship, people who are seeking to go to school, and to be present in other sensitive locations like hospitals.
Governor Walz, what does it mean for children in Minnesota if ICE comes to their classrooms?
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. Minnesota prioritizes education. We're proud of our education system. We're proud that when students come to school, they get a good meal, they have well-qualified teachers, and it's a place where it's safe. It's a safe place where they can learn. We prioritize it because our economy depends upon it, and it's the right thing to do. Disruptions at places like school, when ICE is free to operate in Minnesota within the laws, but to disrupt schools, to disrupt and come to those schools, not only the impact to that individual student, but to the entire learning environment in those schools are disrupted by it. And again, we agree with everyone here, those committing crimes is where we need to focus, but being on campuses in elementary schools is not getting at that.
Thank you. Governor Pritzker, when ICE detains and arrests parents as they drop off kids at school, how does this affect educational outcomes?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Let me begin by saying that, as you may know, under President Trump, ICE showed up in Chicago nearly immediately and began terrorizing our neighborhoods, our schools, and parents. Indeed, many parents felt like they needed to go into hiding, even though their children needed to go to school every day. And so disrupting that environment, frankly, not just for the children, but for the parents and for teachers and the entire school community, it is something that, we believe in Illinois in educating all of our kids, making sure that they get what they need in our public schools. In fact, we've invested significantly in making sure the results have been very good. 8th graders in Illinois rank 2nd in reading in the entire country. 8th graders in Illinois rank 5th in the country in mathematics. And it's because we have a safe environment, but not when Tom Homan brings Dr. Phil with the overreach of force with ICE to disrupt our education system, and particularly our elementary schools.
Thank you. Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes the Majority Whip, Mr. Emmer from Minnesota.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back to Washington, Governor. I'm going to run through a series of facts before I get to my questions, so let's get started. Governor Walz, you signed the Health and Human Services Omnibus Bill into law in May of 2023. That bill expanded Minnesota Care to provide free health care to illegal aliens. You You signed the Higher Education Omnibus Bill into law in May of 2023. That bill allows illegals to have their college tuition paid for by the state. You signed the Driver's License for All Act into law in March of 2023, and that bill allows illegals to receive driver's licenses. So, you claim you're not a sanctuary state. You just provide free health care, free college, and driver's licenses to illegal aliens. One reason you're here testifying before us today is because you refuse to cooperate with ICE. While states like Florida and Virginia empower their law enforcement to detain and remove criminal illegal aliens, you, sir, have done just the opposite. Your Attorney General is directing law enforcement to ignore ICE immigration detainers. Do you agree with the Attorney General's guidance?
Well, Congressman, it's good to see you again, and thank you for being here. First, I would say is my job as governor of Minnesota is to make Minnesota the best state in the nation.
Do you agree with the Attorney General's guidance?
Congressman, what I would say on this is that Minnesota follows all law. I would say
it's a very easy question. And again, if you claim you're not a sanctuary state, you just claim that you support policies. You're not a sanctuary state, but you support policies that prevent ICE from doing their job.
Congressman,
isn't that right?
That is incorrect, Congressman. We follow the same laws when you were in the Minnesota House. The law has not changed,
If you'll allow me, I've got limited time. Well, that's what you tweeted, by the way, sir. And on May 23rd, 2018, you tweeted, quote, "I support policies that keep law enforcement from enforcing federal laws," close quote. On May 17th, just this spring, at the University of Minnesota Law School's commencement ceremony, you said, quote, "Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets." When you said the words modern-day Gestapo, you were referring to ICE agents. Gestapo, by the way, sir, was the official secret police of Hitler's Nazi Germany. So you're calling ICE agents modern-day Nazis. Given the attacks on ICE agents that took place in Los Angeles over the weekend, don't you regard your dangerous inflammatory rhetoric as a problem?
The questions you want me to answer first.
So, sir, it saddens me that you refuse to express regret from comparing ICE to Nazis. ICE agents are brave Americans who get up every morning, leave their families, and put their lives in harm's way to protect our country, sir. You, at the very least, owe an apology to these dedicated public servants. I will say, sir, inflammatory rhetoric such as yours and the other governors on this panel is responsible for putting a target on the back of every ICE agent who is risking their life to protect our communities. Minnesota is all too familiar, by the way, with the chaos that ensues when you refuse to work with law enforcement to enforce the law. In May 2020, looting, acts of violence, and arson occurred on your watch in Minneapolis after you refused to bring in the National Guard. Governor, your agenda is clear: free health care, free college and driver's licenses for illegals while handcuffing law enforcement when they're trying to protect our citizens and their communities. If you think that's not a sanctuary state, you shouldn't be governor. By turning Minnesota into a magnet for illegals, you have opened up our communities to dangerous criminals, including known terrorists, gang members, murderers, and child predators. You have sent a resounding message that if you're a hardworking, law-abiding citizen of Minnesota, your safety and well-being are not the priorities of Tim Walz and his administration. But if you're coming to our state illegally, you're not only welcome with open arms, you're entitled to free stuff on the taxpayer's dime. This is absolutely disgraceful. Governor Walz, your sanctuary state agenda has been defined by your utter failure. You have failed to enforce the rule of law. You have failed to uphold our national sovereignty. And most importantly, you have failed the people of Minnesota. The time for radical sanctuary state policy, sir, is over. The voters made that clear last November when they elected President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. You remember him, don't you? Governor, the time for real leaders and real leadership is now. And with that, sir, actually, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record the governor's tweet that I referenced from May 23rd, 2018, which makes it clear his hatred for federal law enforcement. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Chair recognizes Mr. Mfume.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I have a unanimous consent request, and I'd like to present both of those to you at the same time.
Proceed.
Okay. I ask unanimous consent that we enter into the record an article from The Hill of the 8th day of June. Latinos for Trump co-founder blast inhumane immigration arrest.
Without objection to order.
Thank you, sir. And the second one is from the Independent of May the 28th. Trump ordered a critically ill 4-year-old Mexican girl to leave the country. Experts say she could die in days. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection to order.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes Mr. Kristamorte from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor Pritzker, when it comes to immigration, you've been clear that Illinois follows the law. I'd like to go into this issue just a little further. First, there's been a lot of misinformation about the Illinois Trust Act. As you know, this is the 2017 law signed by then Republican Governor Bruce Rauner, which requires state agencies to cooperate with ICE when it presents a criminal arrest warrant for an individual, correct?
Congressman, yes, that's correct.
And just to be clear, the Illinois State Police, the Department of Corrections, and other Illinois agencies must cooperate with ICE when they present a criminal arrest warrant, correct?
And do every single time.
This is Illinois law.
Yes,
Donald Trump may not like state law, as we're seeing in California, but what Donald Trump likes is irrelevant. The law is the law. The Wall Street Journal reports that ICE's recent raids in California, including at a Home Depot in the LA area, were organized because the administration was falling way short of its cruel goal of deporting thousands of people per day. Politico said this is, quote, the standoff that Trump wanted. There's another reason why Trump has provoked the current situation in California. He doesn't want to talk about what he calls the big, beautiful bill and what I call the large, lousy law. So let's talk about what Trump doesn't want to discuss. What Trump doesn't want to discuss is that his large, lousy law cuts $625 billion in Medicaid, a program that insures millions of Americans. Governor Walz, in a press release on Medicaid cuts, you said, quote, the victims of these cuts will be families, children, veterans, rural Americans, and pregnant moms. That's what you said, right?
That's correct, Congressman.
And Governor Hochul, in a recent op-ed, you wrote, even if you don't rely on Medicaid, these cuts affect you. Because when millions lose coverage, hospitals and other vital health care institutions lose funding. And that strains the entire system. That's what you wrote, right?
That is correct, sir.
Governor Pritzker, cuts in the large, lousy law are going to leave upwards of 700,000 Illinoisans without health insurance. Isn't that correct?
Yes, people will die.
Trump's large, lousy law adds trillions to the national debt as well, which could force $500 billion in automatic cuts to Medicare, in addition to the cuts in Medicaid that we just referred to. And of course, Medicare is a program that every senior relies on. Let me turn to my final topic. Governor Pritzker, President Trump has called Illinois, quote, a poorly run state. But the truth, of course, is the opposite. Governor, Illinois has had 7 consecutive balanced budgets, right?
That's correct, Congressman.
And our credit rating has been raised 9 times in the last 6 years, correct?
After 21 downgrades under Republican and others.
And it now stands at an A rating, right?
It does.
In contrast, under President Trump, every credit agency has downgraded America's credit rating below the top level, the first time in history that's happened. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Trump and others claim the federal government props up Illinois. But in reality, we're one of 13 states in the country that actually give more tax revenue to Washington, D.C. than we receive in return. Now, let me turn to some of the reasons why Illinois is a donor state and not a taker state. Illinois has a $1.1 trillion economy. We produce the most soybeans in America, and we're the number 2 producer of corn, right?
That is correct.
We're the number 2 manufacturing state in the country.
We are.
And we're the number 2 destination for corporate expansions and relocations, right?
And Chicago is number 1.
Thanks to you, we have the world's first quantum and microelectronics park, correct?
That's right.
And we're ranked top in the Midwest for workforce development, correct?
Yes, we are.
And startups.
That's right.
Illinois is the heart and soul of America, Governor. It's where the cell phone was invented, was home to the first McDonald's, and was the home of amazing leaders. Lincoln, Reagan, Obama, Grant, even Superman, and yes, the Pope. And here's a picture of the Pope wearing a Chicago White Sox cap. The next Pope's going to be a Cubs fan.
There you go.
Illinois has terrific jobs, people, and pizza. Some may even say that God is on our side, Governor. I'm proud to be from Peoria. I'll always stand up for Illinois, loud and proud. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Hochul, third paragraph, second sentence in your written testimony, you said New York State cooperates with U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement in criminal cases. Governor, who's Jesus Romero Hernandez?
Thank you. I want to reaffirm that we do cooperate in cases where...
That wasn't the question. I just read your statement. I can read your statement. Who is Jesus Romero Hernandez?
I don't have the details on every single person in a state of 20 million people.
I understand, but this guy's a citizen of Mexico, deported 7 times, came to your state, assaulted one of your residents with a machete, choked a police officer, then when he was in custody, assaulted a corrections officer. ICE finds out this guy is in your state's custody, and they send you a detainer. You're familiar with a detainer, right?
Yes, I am.
Notice of action immigration detainer to Tompkins County Jail from Syracuse Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Section 1, they check a couple boxes. The first one they check is a final order of removal against the alien has taken place. That means a court has said this guy needs to go. This machete-wielding, cop-choking, corrections officer assaulting guy needs to go. Then they also check another box and they say biometric confirmation of who this individual is, this alien's identity. So they got the right guy, and a court has said he needs to go. Any idea what Tompkins County Jail decided to do with that detainer order?
I will tell you this: the state of
it's a specific question.
No,
what did Tompkins County do?
The descriptions you have put forth are absolutely chilling and disturbing and reprehensible to all of us. My job is to protect the people of New York.
The question. What did Tompkins County do?
What I have responsibility for,
I will tell you, since you're not going to answer.
Courts,
we cannot and will not hold Mr. Hernandez. Yeah. We can't keep the machete guy who had choked a police officer and assaulted a corrections officer. We can't keep him. In fact, we have the back and forth from Tompkins County and ICE on January 28th of this year, 8:56 p.m. Tompkins County tells ICE, we're not going to hold this guy. 7 minutes later, ICE responds back, we will be there to take custody this evening. 24 minutes later, Thompson County reiterates, we're not going to have him. We're not going to turn him over. 10:45. ICE arrives at the jail. 1 hour and 18 minutes later, and guess what? Mr. Hernandez is not there. They couldn't wait 1 hour and 18 minutes for a guy who assaulted one of your residents with a machete, choked a police officer, and then when in custody, assaulted corrections officers. That is sanctuary policy in a nutshell, and that is what your state supports, and so do these other governors. That is what is so wrong, why the American people hate this concept.
You're conflating what the state of New York does is I control state police and prisons. We have turned over 1,300 people.
So you disagree with it?
We turn over 1,300 people. Did the sheriff make the wrong call? Those are local policies that we would not have done in the state of New York. State of New York, that is a local decision. So you're saying the sheriff's wrong? I would say this: if it happened in a state prison, we have already turned over 1,300 people.
Sheriff
in fact,
in Tompkins County, a Democrat or Republican, Governor.
There have been times. Excuse me.
The sheriff in Thompson County, a Democrat or Republican?
Excuse me. There have been times.
I ask the questions, you give the answer.
I'm asking,
is he a Democrat or Republican?
For a second,
you know?
I'm asking for this moment to explain that I'm sometimes waiting for ICE to come pick up people. Is he a Democrat or Republican, and do you agree with the actions he took? He's a Democrat. Do you agree with the actions he took? How about that question? They are in conflict with what the state of New York would do.
Well, maybe they're scared. By the way, he is a Democrat sheriff. Maybe the county guys are a little scared because you said this. I'm quoting from, it looks like the New York Times. We all know you can trust them. This is last month, May 25th. You said we have some counties that are renegade counties and work with ICE. Maybe they're nervous of being called a renegade county by their governor. So the Democrat sheriff says, we're not going to keep the machete-wielding, cop-choking, corrections officer assaulting guy. We're not going to keep him here for you to get here. We can't even wait an hour and 18 minutes. Oh, you know what else was interesting in this case? You know what else was interesting? There was actually an arrest warrant from United States District Court, Northern District of New York, signed by Judge Wiley Danks, magistrate from Syracuse. There was an arrest warrant, and they still couldn't keep him.
The state of New York cooperates. We cooperate in removal of individuals who've served time. We responded to detention. You're confusing, and maybe there's a lesson in civics here that's necessary.
On the record right here, I got 12 seconds. Will you say on the record, was Tompkins County wrong in the actions they took on January 25th, 2025, when they wouldn't hold the guy for 1 hour and 18 minutes?
Those are not the policies that we would have in the state of New York. Those are not the policies we would have in a
Were they wrong?
Because I've already
turned that guy over to ICE. It's a simple question, Governor.
That was a horrible situation. The person should not have been out there. And
it's a horrible situation, but it's a yes or no question.
It is a response that this is a locality.
Do you agree or disagree?
In the state of New York, the person should have been held.
Yes or no?
The person should have been held, and in the state of New York, we would have turned him over. That is in conflict with what we would do as a state with respect to prison. And I want to know why ICE won't come and pick up the individuals who have served time in our state. I have cases where they have not even shown
Governor,
up.
A court order and a detainer for a guy who did the things Mr. Hernandez did, and Tompkins County can't hold him an hour and 18 minutes, and you won't say that's wrong?
I have said we cooperate when there's a criminal case where someone has committed a crime. We turn them over.
This is sanctuary policy in a nutshell. You won't even condemn something that anyone with common sense knows is ridiculous.
You're mischaracterizing the laws of the state
I had
of
the
New York.
facts here. Oh, can I do one other thing, Mr. Chairman? Now he's been rearrested, and guess what? This guy who's now been rearrested, there is imminent danger that this inmate will do injury to himself and to others and presents a threat to safety, security, and good order of the facility, so he's not permitted to leave his cell. So this guy is not even allowed out of his cell, but they let him out on the street a few months ago. That's how ridiculous this is.
When he does leave his cell, it'll go back to his country under our orders.
Chair recognizes Mr. Mfume, and I'll give you an extra minute.
Oh, there you go.
Mr. Chairman, I've got 2 unanimous consent requests that I hope not count against my time.
Okay, we won't.
Okay.
Clock stop.
I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article from Forbes magazine entitled "Trump Team Focuses Deportations on Immigration Numbers, Not on Criminals."
Without objection, so ordered.
And an article from the Rolling Stone from the 6th of last month entitled "Trump has now deported multiple U.S. citizen children with cancer."
Without objection to order. That's a good diversity of sources.
It is.
Forbes and Rolling Stone.
Yes.
I like that. All right. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A couple of things on the record and then some observations. I don't know that I necessarily have any questions, but I do have some observations and a statement. I think before we let this get out of control, everybody on this side of the aisle is against violence of all forms. Everybody on this side of the aisle finds that to be unacceptable. We believe that convicted criminals who are incidentally illegally here and have been convicted should have no safe harbor. And we believe that victims of criminals should have our collective prayers and empathy. So this is not about Democrats not having a balance or about Democrats supporting something that is not right. The other thing that I want to say is that I find something eerily chilling about what's going on here. And what's chilling about it is that if I take myself out of 2025 and roll myself back in time, some of the hatred that I see displayed under the guise of good government just scares the hell out of me. We're not that far away from situations that existed where things like this affected other groups. And I'm not talking about anybody that's a convicted illegal criminal. I'm talking about innocent Americans who live in our neighborhoods, who do the work that we won't do, who abide by the laws, who play by the rules, who love their new country and who cherish their faith. Because if we just roll this clock on the wall back 75 years, we'd be looking at a time in Nazi Germany where people ran around with signs like this new ICE sign that says, "Report all foreign invaders to ICE," with Uncle Sam there holding up the sign. This could have been a Gestapo member 75 years ago. "Report all Jews." 100 years before that, it could be a plantation owner that said, report all Negroes and all coloreds and all those who are from Africa because they are disrupting our country. So let's not get it twisted here. We in this country are not pure and pristine. We had runaway slave laws to kick the people who ran away from slavery. We had 50 years of black codes where you got fines and you got rewards and you got all sorts of things if you did or did not do something to report black people. After 150 years of slavery and 100 years of segregation and 100 years of Jim Crow after that, you could be arrested for anything in this country not that long ago. I remember when the National Guard was deployed in 1968, and I walked out of my house facing fixed bayonets with men in uniform, not knowing what the hell they were there for, but obeying the chief executive officer of this country. And I know what it's like to face a bayonet and to face a National Guardsman. And I've seen the tension that it brought about and how that group of demonstrations across this country continue to go for days and days and days. And so don't give me something about, there's something about these people because they're immigrants. No, there's something about them because they're people, and like all groups, they've got bad people in them. I could have been arrested 75 years ago for walking into a restaurant, for drinking out of a water fountain, for being accused of looking at a white woman like Emmett Till did in 1955, and he was burned and lynched in this country. When future generations peer through the telescope of time, I hope that they look at us and realize that there are some who chose not to shirk their responsibility, not to run away from the reality and to face it head on. You know, not too long ago, I went to visit a proud lady who this year will celebrate her 149th anniversary. And she stands today, even as we sit in this hour. In her left hand is a great torch. And in her right hand, guess what? She clings the Declaration of Independence close to her breast. And on her head is a crown of spikes. And on her feet, broken shackles, symbolizing freedom from tyranny, the tyranny that so many immigrants faced before coming to this country. And as that plane flew over, I could still hear her cry out through silent, concrete lips, saying, "Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses who yearn to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore," she says. "Send those, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. For I left my lamp beside the golden door, that all of you and all of you and all of you might follow." And so we came. Some took the circuitous route. Some came for a thrill, and some of us came against our will. But we came and became what we are today as a nation. And we must never lose sight of the things that make us great or the things that take away from our greatness. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Pritzker, do you know how much illegal immigration costs your state each year?
No, sir, I do not.
Costs over $780 per family per year. That's a lot of money, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And may I ask, what do you mean by the cost?
That is a lot of money.
The cost of illegal immigration.
Let me ask you, do you know who Franklin Jose Pena Ramos is?
Are you talking about the federal government's cost to the state of Illinois as a result of the failed
Ramos is?
Immigration policy?
It's a yes or no question. I'll take that as a no. Do you know who Jose Martinez Rangel is?
No, sir, I do not.
You don't. You should. Those are two men who came into this country illegally, raped and murdered 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary in my home state of Texas. Do you think that elected officials should have welcomed them into our communities?
Sir, before they committed a crime, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Do you think that they should have been welcomed into our communities? It's a very straightforward question.
Someone who commits murder, no. Someone who commits murder should be apprehended.
Why did you state during Biden's border crisis that illegal aliens, quote, should have been welcomed and helped by elected officials?
When you say illegal aliens, these are people who are given
welcomed
asylum.
and helped into our communities.
People who are
That's
asylum
easy
seekers.
yes or no question.
You're mischaracterizing them.
It is your position that they should have been welcomed into our communities. Is that correct?
There were asylum
That's from
seekers
your
who were
own
here
statement.
legally.
And
There
then
were
they went
asylum
on and
seekers.
murdered and raped 12-year-old Jocelyn.
Someone who
Nunnery.
commits murder should be held accountable. We do that in the state.
And you
of
think
Illinois.
they should have been welcomed into our communities before they did?
I don't know how you can tell before somebody commits a crime
You can
that they are
secure the
going to
border
commit the
and
crime.
not let illegal aliens come into our communities. Do you support abolishing ICE?
Asylum seekers.
Do you support abolishing ICE?
No, I believe we need an immigration force in the United States.
You don't.
In fact,
You believe a budget is a moral document. Is that correct?
I do.
You do. You tweeted that. Your administration gave $12,000 to the Organized Communities Against Deportations, which just this past month was marching in the streets of Chicago with signs saying "Abolish ICE." Do you support this?
I do not.
Is this a
support
reflection of
abolishing
your
an
moral
immigration
values?
force.
Is this a reflection of your moral values?
I do not support abolishing an immigration force.
That's good to hear. Mr. Governor, do you think the biological men should be able to use women's restrooms?
I'm not sure how this has to do with immigration.
It's just a yes or no question.
Why are you?
It's very easy to
politicizing
answer.
this?
Do you
I
think
thought
that
we were
men
here
should be using
doing
women's
fact
restrooms?
finding. I'm sorry.
Do you think men should be allowed in women's restrooms?
I'm not sure why this has come to this issue.
You
It has
tweeted
nothing
that
to do
as
with
a
immigration.
protest against President Trump, everyone should use the other gender's bathroom today. Have you ever used the women's restroom?
Not that I can recall ever, sir. No.
You wanted everybody else to do it, but you didn't?
Sir, I'm not sure why we're on a topic that has nothing
I'm asking
to do
you,
with
you're
today's hearing.
advocating for men to use women's restrooms, but you didn't do it?
I do not advocate that, no.
Well, actually, you did. You said everyone should use the other gender's bathroom today.
I can tell you that you are
Do you regret
politicizing
saying
this
this?
in a way that what we ought to be focusing on is
Do you regret
failure of the federal
encouraging men to
government
use women's restrooms?
and the Congress to deal with immigration reform.
Do you regret encouraging men to use women's restrooms?
Again, you're taking us on topics that have.
Did you ever
nothing to
consider
do
that
with
women don't
the
want you in
subject
their-
that you
in their
invited us here
bathrooms?
for? So you're admitting that this is just a political circus.
No,
Is that
I'm
what you're doing?
asking you
This
because
is
you put
nothing
this
to do
on,
with
on the internet
immigration
for everybody
and really
to see.
about you grandstanding.
I'm asking you, have you ever considered that women don't want you in their bathrooms? That's a private space that they don't want you or any other man in.
Congressman, let's talk about
you
your
can't say that
failure to
normal
vote
people can
for
say that
Medicaid.
they
In
don't-
fact, you want to
that
take
they don't
Medicaid
think
away.
men should be in
and
women's
SNAP
restrooms.
And
That's a
veteran
very
services.
straightforward question.
You apparently want people
And you're
to die
encouraging men to
in the
use
United
women's
States
restrooms
because you
where there
want
could
to
be
take healthcare
underage
away.
girls. Do you think that's appropriate?
Sir, if we're going to
Do you think that's
politicize
normal?
this, let's talk about what you're doing to people in
you
this
think that
country
that's normal?
by virtue of your vote.
All right, let's move on.
with
Let's
President
ask,
Trump.
do you support Hamas's agenda?
Sir, I do not. They are a terrorist organization.
Your administration gave a grant to the Muslim Civic Coalition, which just 2 weeks after October 7th was marching in the streets of Chicago to, quote, stop the U.S.-backed genocide against Gaza. Is that a reflection of your values?
I have spent my life fighting anti-Semitism.
No, I'm asking,
my
is this a reflection of your values?
I'm not sure why you're attacking
Because
me
your
about something in an
administration
organization.
gave money to this organization.
I'm explaining to you that what we do in the state of Illinois is stand up for what we believe are.
You didn't have to
rights
give
and
money
freedoms.
to the Muslim Civic Coalition.
People
to
have
march
the
and
right
call,
to express themselves.
to stop the
We don't-
U.S.-backed genocide against Gaza. That was your choice.
I know
that was your
Republicans want to
administration.
take away people's right to free speech. We don't in the state of Illinois, and I
They've
do
got
not
the
believe
right to
that
free
is
speech.
proper.
They don't have the right to tax dollars, and you gave them to them.
You want to take those rights away from people. I understand.
Gentlemen, time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Brown from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Trump administration isn't serious about public safety. It's not serious about solving immigration challenges. It's only serious about blatantly violating constitutional rights, stoking fear, and demonizing immigrants for political gain. That's why Trump is weaponizing ICE to recklessly and lawlessly target immigrant communities. And here's the reality. 2 weeks ago, I met with community leaders from across my district. Multiple Hispanic faith leaders told me the same thing. Their congregants, regardless of immigration status, are afraid. Afraid to speak Spanish in public, afraid to attend community events, afraid to go to church. because ICE under this administration has shown it will harass, detain, and deport even wrongfully. No due process, no oversight, no transparency. And now we're seeing this fear weaponized at scale. Just this week, the president deployed 4,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles without the consent or consultation of California's governor. So let's be clear. This isn't about border security. This is not about law and order. What it is really about is a reckless power grab. Militarizing American cities doesn't make anyone safer. It escalates and puts everyone at risk. So, Governor Pritzker, as Commander-in-Chief of your National Guard, how concerned are you about this executive overreach?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and thank you for the remarks that you just made. Our job as governors is to concern ourselves with the public safety of our states. And indeed, one of the very important things that we do is listen to our local law enforcement and listen to the local officials who ask us for help when they need it. We have probably, in my view, forgive me, governors, we have the best state police in the entire country, and we have terrific 13,000-person National Guard. We go to our state police for support, and then, if necessary, we will ask the National Guard to step in. And again, only when local law enforcement and our local officials ask us for that help. When the President of the United States goes in over the top to grab our National Guard for domestic security, when there is not, as he said in a memo falsely, a rebellion, that is taking away the rights and obligations of a governor. And it ought to be done in consultation with governors. In fact, the more local you get, the more accurate, I believe, the information is about what's happening on the ground. That's why I speak with local leaders of law enforcement, CPD in Chicago or others, before we take any action with National Guard. The President of the United States fails. Why? Because he wants mayhem in the streets. Why did he call in Marines?
And that's the point. This administration says it's targeting violent criminals, but that's not what's happening. They're going after parents dropping off their kids, workers showing up to their jobs, and asylum seekers navigating the legal system. And let me say this plainly. If you commit a violent crime in this country, you should be prosecuted. If you came here to do harm, this country is not your home. Governor Pritzker, can you set the record straight with which direction is violent crime headed in your state, up or down?
Down significantly.
Thank you. And Governor Pritzker, across the country, undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit violent crimes than U.S. citizens. Does that hold true in your state?
Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than people who already live there.
Now, that may come as a surprise to some tuning in today, especially those fed a steady diet of fear. A recent poll found that Fox News viewers are twice as likely to believe the false claim that immigrants commit more crime. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true. So let's stop with the scapegoating and start focusing on real solutions. So quick yes or no's, Governor Pritzker. Did Trump's pardon of the January 6 defendants who violently attacked police officers make Illinois safer?
It did not.
Does blocking common sense gun laws like universal background checks make your state safer?
Absolutely not.
Did DOGE cuts to community violence prevention funding make your state safer?
Much less safe.
Would cutting Medicaid to pay for tax breaks for the wealthy make your state safer?
No.
Cutting SNAP benefits?
No.
Okay, so this is what we are dealing with this current administration. Things that are not making our country any safer and are doing harm to the people who need it the most. And with that, Mr. Chairman.
Lady yields back chair, and I recognize Mr. Donalds from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. To piggyback off my colleague, Governor Pritzker, how much does the state of Illinois spend on illegal immigration every year?
Again, illegal immigration, that's a federal responsibility. They could tell how much is wasted as a result of their failures.
Governor, don't you keep track of how many people are on your Medicaid rolls, how many people who are illegal immigrants in the state of Illinois who are getting actually benefits in your state? Doesn't your government keep track of that?
They don't get Medicaid in Illinois or any state as far as I know.
Governor Pritzker, you do not keep track of any public service dollars in the state of Illinois that goes to illegal immigrants or goes to people in your state who are not legal residents of the United States. and of the state of Illinois? You don't keep track of that.
We absolutely keep track of our budget, and we're very closely. And in fact, it's been balanced for 7 years in a row, unlike the Republican before me. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I noticed that in the state of Illinois, you guys don't really keep track of your money, because I asked your mayor in Chicago similar question about a month ago, and he didn't have an answer. It was quite interesting. I think this might be an Illinois problem. Governor Hochul, in your state, you are spending about roughly $4 billion on illegal immigration. And at the same time, you are actually asking the federal government for $4 billion to finish Penn Station. Don't you think it would be better to stop funding illegal immigrants in your state and actually use those resources to finish Penn Station as opposed to coming to the federal government for the money?
Penn Station is owned by Amtrak, not by the state, so it's an appropriate use of their dollars, and Donald Trump has agreed to spend upwards of $7 billion. I appreciated that very much. What we spend on immigrants, the immigrants who are here hardworking to live a life and working on our farms and taking care of our parents in nursing homes and taking care of our children, they have been coming here for 400 years. And we don't keep track of individuals based on their status. We make sure that people have services so we don't end up with an unexpected.
So essentially what you're telling me is that you keep no track of money that is going to people who are not legal in the United States, resources that are taken away from New Yorkers, resources that are taken away from Illinoisans. You guys do not keep track of any of this.
You know what's really challenging is that many people came here with legal status. I mean, temporary protective status, 300,000.
Do you
all of a sudden they wake up one day and it's
do you
gone.
go along with the strategy from the Biden administration, which massively expanded immigration protocols that overwhelmed your city and overwhelmed your state? Do you agree with that?
We call for secure borders. We call for this body to
I
do
never
its
remember
job.
you calling for secure borders at all, Governor Hochul.
We certainly have.
That
We
doesn't
certainly
sound
have.
like him to my
many,
memory.
Many conversations I had with the White House, been many times when bipartisan legislation is presented to this body,